Jasmine Gage, and I'm going to be demonstrating how to make paper beads. Detailed photos and steps of this project, as well as templates, tips, and other information can be found on the Crafting at Home LibGuide, the URL for which is guides.sspl.org/crafting-at-home/paper-beads. And what I really like about this project is it's super accessible. You can use so many different kinds of papers, different kinds of glue, any sort of whatever you have lying around the house. And so these are all the different experiments that I did. I'm trying to learn how to do these and come up with what I like best. So you can use scrap paper, printer paper, any kind of craft paper, wrapping paper, recycled food boxes, really anything. Doesn't matter if it does or doesn't have a pattern. For example, something like this. I end up with these speckled red and white ones. So you can kind of just play around with it and see what you come up with. What I'm going to be doing today is the 1-inch oblong bead. This is one I've made out of scrap paper. Those little black flecks there are actually the words from the paper, which I left on the outside to see what it would look like. That was pretty interesting. And I wouldn't really make a bead larger than this, just for practical reasons, but it's big enough that you can see it a little bit on the video. And the 11-inch length is just a really common size that most people would have, even if it's just junk mail. So whatever you have lying around. Today I am going to use this kind of indigo cardstock because it's a little bit thicker and it'll give us a bulkier bead. So you can see some of them that I made there. This is with the regular printer paper, and this is the cardstock. So you can see it adds a nice bit of width there. First thing you're going to do is mark off the short edges of your paper, and it's going to be every 1 inch with a 1/2 inch left over at the end. And you're going to need the two short ends staggered by 1/2 inch. So you can either start at 0, 1, 2, 3, and then at the bottom do 0, 1/2, 1 1/2, 2 1/2, or you can just flip it and that will happen for you automatically. Next, you're going to take your ruler or straight edge and connect those with these lines to form your page of isosceles triangles. And if you're not going to do a whole set of them, you don't need to do a whole page. You can just mark off one or a couple, whatever you're going to use. And then we'll cut them out. So I've got some pre-cut here. And these are the 1-inch isosceles triangles, the ones that were on most of the sheet there. But you will end up with these two edge pieces, two 1/2 inch right triangles. So you can either discard those if you don't want them, or I will show you two other shaped beads that you can make out of those. The first step, you're going to need a glue stick, and you'll put just a little strip of glue on the 1-inch end of your paper there. You're going to take a toothpick and position it right under that glue strip and fold it over. And this will form the channel inside your bead. You want to hold on to that and press it until it's dry. Make it nice and sturdy. And you can take your fingernail or another toothpick or anything and press it up against the toothpick. Get a good crease in there. And as it's drying, you want to move the toothpick around. You can roll it and slide it back and forth just to make sure that no extra glue is sealing it on there. Once that's dry, if you have a cardstock or anything thicker than that, you're going to want to start to train the paper to roll around the toothpick. So a couple times around, you just roll it up without any extra glue. You can see it's starting to get that shape on there. Now we're going to apply some more glue, and you'll just do it in sections. I'm doing a few inches long there. If you're just starting, you can do a little bit at a time while you kind of get the finger motion down. And then you just roll it up. So two things to pay attention to when you're making paper beads during the rolling part. One, you want to make sure you're rolling it nice and tight. So you're going to check the ends for any gaps between your layers. So you can make it nice and strong and solid. And you're also going to want to pay attention to your alignment. So for this shape bead, it's going to stay centered. As you roll, you'll have the same amount on both sides of the rest of your triangle. And if you start to go off course, you can just kind of nudge it a little bit before it dries. Keep adding your glue and rolling it up as you go until you get to the end. Again, check for gaps, and if you go off center, just nudge it along. You might need a little bit of extra glue on that very tip of your triangle there. So that has a tendency to pop up, especially if you're varnishing them. You don't have to varnish them when you're done, depending on the project. But especially if you're making jewelry or you want any kind of water resistance, you should paint something on there at the end. I'm not going to do that right now because it does take a while for it to dry because the paper soaks up so much of it. But I will show you one that I did the other day. So this is the completed bead, unvarnished. And as you're done, you just want to slide it around a couple more times just to make sure no extra glue got on there. And then this little bit darker one is one that I varnished. So there's not a ton of difference, but it does protect it a little bit, made it a little bit darker in this case, and gave it a little shine. And that one I actually just did with some old clear nail polish. And if you don't have any fancy paper or anything, you could also use colored nail polish or other paint that on after. Other varnish options, if you have regular commercial one, you can paint that on as well. Or you could just thin down some liquid school glue. So again, lots of options. Now, those little edge strips, we're going to do two different shapes with those. First one is this cone bead. There's 3 of them on there that I made. And you can use them as accent pieces on the end of your project or do a whole project out of these. You know, it really just depends on what kind of bead you want to make. So the cool thing about making the paper beads is even if you switch shapes, it's still all the same steps. You just change the alignment potentially. So for these, we're going to switch from a center alignment to keeping it along the perpendicular edge here, so that right corner. I put my little bit of glue on, fold it over and crease it on there, spinning my toothpick. Get a nice crease in there. And train it with rolling it up. Now as you do the cone beads, and then it'll be the same thing for the teardrops as well, you're going to want to keep that alignment straight, especially as you start out. And I will usually do that by pressing it against the flat of my fingernail. So if you start to go off course, you can, if you catch it in time before your glue has dried, you can slide it back and line it up. Now on the lip guide that I mentioned earlier, there's 9 different templates that I made for this project. So they're for tube beads and the oblong beads that we just made, and then the cone or teardrop shaped beads. And each one of those will give you how many beads per sheet. So like the oblong beads, you can get 16 out of one piece of printer paper, or the smallest ones, I think, are the little round beads. And that is just this tiny little guy right here, the round beads, and you get almost 70 out of those out of one sheet of paper. So like I said, it doesn't really take a lot of materials to get through a lot of these. And there's instructions for use of those templates, but you can also just print on some thicker cardstock and then cut out a couple of those and use them as a pattern to draw it on any kind of paper, wrapping paper. The nice thing with the wrapping paper is you can use just little bits even if they were already used for wrapping on a gift. And a lot of the papers have those lines marked on the back, which helps you in your measuring and marking. So that's kind of already done, which is nice. So there's another cone bead. Slide it around again. And now I'll show you the teardrop. Again, your little right triangle strip. This is a 1/2 inch. Fold it over on the perpendicular edge. Get your crease in, hold it till it dries and move your toothpick. On that lib guide, I also came up with different categories of tips that I came up with and doing different versions of these about papers and glues and varnishes and making different shapes. But it's really, it's so easy to just try different versions of it, and you can come up with all sorts of stuff. So again, keep that side alignment for the teardrop. Go back if you have any gaps that you need to fix. And what's different on this one is after we get a good portion of the way in there, we're going to shift the alignment a little bit back towards the center. And then we will center it on where we end up. And that's what gives it that sort of thicker, rounder end. And this shape is a good one that you may end up kind of molding it as you finish up to fix the alignment. Get your round part where you want it. So once you get kind of a point and a thicker end, then you're going to ease it back towards the center and then center it on that new area that you've landed on. You can use other glues for this. I just found that the glue stick worked really well. So there you go, you got your skinnier pointed end, and then it centers on this thicker end down here. Again, you might need some extra glue on your tip if it keeps popping up. If you have a really troublesome one that you just can't get to stick, you can cut off that very end of it. There's a whole collection of those. So again, check out the Crafting at Home lib guide, and thank you for watching.